So hi, welcome to End Credit Reviews. This is Tyler from End Credit Reviews.
And Steven, aka The Big Steve, on YouTube and Instagram.
Mirror, mirror on the wall, what is the worst live-action remake of them all? Well, it's all pretty self-explanatory in the title of this video. So anyway, I think the live-action remake of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is not only one of the worst live-action Disney remakes I've seen from Disney, but I believe that this movie is everything wrong with movies nowadays. If you had to go back in time and ask me what I think is the worst movie that represents everything wrong with the movie industry nowadays back in, let's say, the early 2010s, I probably would have said Battleship. Because that movie represents, like, okay, it's unoriginal, it's based on a board game, and also just copy and paste what's popular at the time, which was Transformers, and it has some obvious product placements like Subway and so on and so forth, and you have some people in the cast who are not actors, like Brooklyn Decker and Army vet guy, I forgot his name, and I think maybe the director's brother was in that movie too, I forget, it's been a long time since I watched it.
Wasn't Rihanna in it too?
Oh yeah, and then also, yeah, you're right, yeah, too, Rihanna, thank you for reminding me, I almost blinked that she was in that one, so yeah, and a singer like Rihanna being in the movie, so again, it's just all of these things about it where I'm like, it's so bad and cliched in all the wrong ways. I mean, of course, bad, it's a double negative right there, but right. The point is, Battleship represent everything wrong with movies at the time, but nowadays, I would say that Snow White is everything wrong with American movies nowadays. So if you've been watching this channel long enough, you know that I'm not a fan of the live-action Disney remakes. And the thing is, the only live-action Disney remake I liked in retrospect is Cinderella because it stayed close enough to the animated movie, but at the same time, it was a movie that, when it made changes, they were changes that made sense. Mainly giving the Prince Charming character more screen time and developing more as a character. And speaking of live-action Disney movies, if you want to read more about the history of Disney's live-action movie failures, is my book, Disney's Live-Action Movie Bombs, 1979-2019, available in both ebook digital and print. Also check out my other book, 100 Years of Universal Monster Movies, also available in ebook digital and in print. So anyway, Steven, what do you think of the live-action Disney remakes?
Yeah, in general, I think we're overall on the same page. I think this is one of those issues where we're in relative agreement, but this is a hot button issue for you, like Transformers is for me, and other certain particular areas. But we both had a just abysmally low expectation for, especially Snow White. And as for the other live-action Disney films that have been released recently, the only one that to be fair, you've probably seen more than I have at this point. And the only one I have seen out of a handful that I thought was remotely decent was The Jungle Book. The Jungle Book, I think, had some redeeming qualities to it. But the rest, including right now, I think Lilo and Stitch is in theaters, it really is just unnecessary. We're out of ideas. Here's copy and paste with a few scenes added and a couple big name actors or influencers even for the time being to incorporate into the film to attempt to get pathetically some butts in seats at the theaters. And the biggest crime these days is where you were saying for like Battleship. I think they were objectively bad, but they had this sort of so bad it was kind of funny in a redemptive way to, just look at a red box and roast after the fact. And so many of these Disney movies are kind of just like, you can tell that once there was a soul in the idea, because there was, and it was in the animated version, but they just stripped it bare, and it's now just this unprocessed corporate slop served up to hungry little piggies. And I that's not to say kids can't find enjoyment of it, because I'm sure they will take the little bits and pieces that have remained from the shell of the animated films. And there is something weird generationally, and especially in the West, about we can't take old cartoons or animated films seriously because that's for kids. That, I think, has been a long time coming out the window, and thanks to not to be a total weeb here or anything, but thanks to anime and other things even from our childhood, we have seen exceptions to that rule where just because something is animated or even intended for kids doesn't mean it has to be kiddie and bad and not good. I hate this word, but content to absorb. Iron Giant is a perfect example. The original Snow White, the Lion King from the 90s, things like that. There's plenty of examples, and even more adult-themed things, like I would say Attack on Titan recently is just, if you're not even an anime fan, go see it. Like, you owe it to yourself. But the point is that we're kind of at this crossroads of still playing by the old rules of basically our parents, where, yeah, let's go see this thing from when I took my kids to it. But they only take it seriously or take the whole family because it's live action. And these are just going to age like milk. Like, everyone who has even a remotely critical eye like us can see it, and regardless of like politics of it, because I know that that's frequently brought into these discussions, that is besides the point. It's just poor quality. And like, while the capacity for something redemptive is possible in these endeavors, they just deliberately choose, as you and I have talked about, you said rule by committee, basically try to please everyone, and in so doing, no one is actually all that happy with the product. It's just lukewarm at best. That's what we get. And in that regard, I think it is a good overall synopsis of the whole shebang that we've had recently of the live-action Disney movies. And Snow White is the crown turd on top of that. So I'm sure we'll talk about it more, but those are my general overview thoughts.
Okay, well, I think Beauty and the Beast, the live-action remake of it, is a close second. And I didn't remember this part about the movie until recently. I forgot to mention this in my video, why I don't like live-action Disney remakes. But in that Hot Trash movie, towards the end, there was this thing that they were trying to be funny about it. But I'm like, so there's a part where Belle was dancing with the Beast at the end. He's basically in his prince form back in, normal and that. And she's basically saying, do you ever think about growing a beard? And then he growls at her in that. And I'm thinking to myself, so another thing this movie was trying to, try to get us to accept was bestiality.
At least they had the decency to not have like a sequel to Beauty and the Beast where he is in a man cave and she's on break and he's writing in an incel beast forum.
I don't know, people jokingly would say more realistically they'd be part of the French Revolution.
Yeah, that would... Yeah, I guess for back then they would be writing on parchment. They wouldn't be typing on a keyboard. It would just be like, "Dear French magazine, these aristocratic women don't be putting out, and I'm mad." Like, yeah, I don't know. It's going to be bad when we get to that point. I probably shouldn't have said that because now Disney's taking notes. But...
Maybe Gaston had a point.
Yeah, Gaston is just like Andrew Tate.
I've heard people try to defend Gaston by saying that, oh, he's the hero the whole time. And I'm like, well, he was a character who definitely becomes a villain when he's like, he threatens to throw Belle's father in an asylum unless she marries him.
Yeah. No,
I can't defend that.
There's definitely some coercive elements where it's like, I don't know, man, we kind of just got to be ignoring the whole women having bodily autonomy for that to remotely work.
And he had like 3 other women who were fawning over him that would have been a much better match for him, too.
And that weirdo guy that was always on his side.
Well, he was a bootlicker.
Oh, I know.
In the animated version.
Yes.
And they definitely changed that obvious course for, be current year and, progressive for the time.
Right.
To trick the millennials to go see it, obviously. But obviously they were played like a violin beautifully by Bob Iger and his folks. But anyway, so enough tangent of Beauty and the Beast. So one of the many reasons I don't like live-action Disney remakes, or at least specifically this one. So with Snow White, you have this whole thing of the story and the ideology. So in the animated Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Snow White desires love. She's singing like, someday my prince will come, I'm wishing for the one I love. But in this one, it's like, oh, being fairest of the land doesn't mean like physical appearance. It's about, power and that. Which, by the way, being the fairest, so that doesn't make any sense. If the evil queen is shown to be a bad ruler of this whole kingdom, how does that mean fair if it's just meaning, oh, you're a good ruler in that? It would make more sense as like, okay, fair meaning she's like the fairest, like she physically looks good. But it also would mean her internal inside too, which is rotten. But her outside, her exterior beauty is like good. But with Snow White in the animated movie, it's like, okay, she's beautiful on the outside, but she's really pure and beautiful on the inside. And eventually that, overshadowed the queen when it comes to being fair. So it makes sense in the context of that movie. But in this one, because everything's about, oh, we don't want romance, we want the power, just like in the live-action Aladdin movie, Jasmine becomes a sultan at the end, instead of just marrying, Aladdin. But the thing is that, I don't know if you realized this or recognized it, but a lot of Disney animated movies in the past 10 plus years tend to dodge romance or have any kind of memorable villains in them. The last Disney animated movie about a man and woman fall in love was Frozen. That was back in 2013. And the last Disney movie villain we had that was in the animated movie that was actually pretty good was Mother Gothel from Tangled. After that, all their villains have been this whole cliche of surprise villain or the twist villain, as some would call it. Or if they are the villain and they don't have a twist about it, it's like, oh, but you understand, I'm misunderstood, or I got, inherited trauma or socioeconomic conditions, trying to overly excuse their bad behavior, which is also in their live-action Disney movies like Cruella or Maleficent. I mean, with Cruella, they didn't overly excuse her bad behavior or try to make her into, the hero of the story and all, but still, it's like, this is just a bad message to be sending to people generally speaking.
Tyler's trying really hard to not say the word heroin to get canceled right now. No.
Because the hero. Yeah. But yeah, that's what I've noticed story-wise with that. And of course, they're trying to say, like, oh, she's not going to be saved by the prince or dream about true love. But of course, when they went back to reshoot this movie various times, they obviously add that in because it was controversial. I could tell, the lead had to concentrate really hard and muster every acting she had, every fiber in her being to not, like, cringe by that or just rage with seeing that. But speaking of, let's move on to the cast team. So, I think it's safe to say of all the live-action movies to not do a race swap of is Snow White. She's called Snow White because it's part of her physical identity. She's described as having skin white as snow in both the animated movie and the Grimm's Brother fairy tale, where it's an adaptation of. So you cast an actress who is Colombian or an origin, and it doesn't also help the fact that she was constantly talking trash about the anime movie, saying that the movie was outdated, and she was like, oh, the prince was like a creepy stalker. And then she ultimately becomes this PR nightmare on the same level as Ezra Miller, where aside from running her mouth off all the time on the movie, she is also making things political. Like when the trailer dropped from Twitter, she was basically saying Free Palestine, and that caused issues with her co-star Gal Gadot, who is a native of that country she has an issue with, and thus the people at Disney had to hire bodyguards to protect Gal Gadot and her family because they were getting death threats because of that. That cost them money. And then
they were going to invade the set if we weren't careful.
And then, of course, after the presidential election happened, she went on an Instagram rant on, just not video, but just like text by saying, like, I hope that everyone didn't vote the way I did, knows no peace. And then 24 hours later, she, retracts that. But that wasn't even her. That was actually like a social media guru who did that for her instead. And yeah, I mean, this actress, I'm not saying that it's 100% her fault why this movie turned out to be so bad, but I would say she was, and it failed, but I would say she was 50% of that problem. And yeah, I'm not saying that she's as bad as Ezra Miller in ways, but I think Ezra Miller was worse than her because at least she wasn't like physically attacking people or like trying to groom a minor allegedly or starting a cult in that. But the thing is, with Rachel Zegler, it's just like she's helping trying to torpedo this movie, and it just really goes to show how up-and-coming talent like her needs to be coached or at least have their social media managed by someone so they don't, ruin the financial possibilities of a movie.
Yeah, there's... I don't know, that being involved in the big fan film that I'm sure I've talked about before, we're constantly kind of weighing associations and walking on eggshells with this type of stuff, generally trying to stay out of politics so that, just to not shoot yourself in the foot, because of course we're all human beings and we have perspectives, but being aware of the climate we're in, especially politically and socially, you really got to be careful. I'm not just saying that to be like, oh, well, don't actually have honest takes with your friends or whatever, but the power structures that really are vetting, especially in Hollywood and in politics, of are you on the right team, and if you're not, you better shut up. So I do think that, unfortunately, this film, while I would definitely agree in terms of like the personal character, objectively Ezra Miller is a much more slimy, bad person for what he did, and he's not the only one to do stuff like that. There's plenty of examples, but it is one of those situations of because of both internet culture and the person themselves just being unwilling and preemptively kind of trying to become, this hero figure for the culture. They are determined to die on a hill way too early in their career, which just ends up making not only themselves but the project itself go completely off the rails and have negative effects, like you see with people already writing off Snow White before it even came out and the trailers were dropping. And it definitely reflects badly that she was so out of touch with the original source material, because regardless of what your personal takes on these sorts of things are, you gotta have some honesty and be a little humble to take your ego out of the situation and go, I'm part of a big project that is bigger than me, and my ego is not the most important thing right now. I have to put that on the side. That's separate, and so many people are just unable to do that. It's all a big, House of Cards, Game of Thrones power game to them that they can't turn the main character syndrome off. And so unfortunately I think this is a casualty of that, but it is also just broader trends of not being creative. You were mentioning the romance thing, and I was recalling, I don't know if I've seen Tangled all the way through off the top of my head, but I know I saw Frozen, and Frozen, I recall, still had a pretty non-traditional romance thing where it was basically the sister instead of the main character having a romance situation. So even there, they were starting to branch off from romance and kind of have it as a secondary feature, which I guess is supposed to play into like the gender politics of, we want equity, so it's got to be her, journey of power. But it's such a weird thing to see romance as a power game, especially in kids' movies. Like, I don't know. I know it's a complicated subject matter that lots of people have takes on, but especially in the realm of kids' classic films like this, where it's supposed to be good guy, bad guy, kind of black and white stuff. I don't think there has to be this just animus culturally towards turning these things into witch hunts, which it just seems we are right in the middle of, and I hope that there's some element of returning to a relative status quo, not saying in like the bad ways that we can see historically, but maybe not instantly assuming the worst of remaking an old cultural classic may be a good idea. I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but...
Yeah, and oddly enough, because you would think that with this absence of romance and actively dodging it, it would be nice and refreshing and perfect timing if they brought romance back into animated movies, because we see this whole epidemic of loneliness that's being felt with a lot of people in their 20s and 30s that is really, sorely lacking in the culture. And that would be nice if they would embrace that again. And also in movies, everyone being a little bit more like optimistic, or maybe just being unapologetically American again, which is probably the reason why Top Gun Maverick did so well, because it wasn't trying to be a movie for the world. It was an American movie for Americans. But oddly enough, with the situation with the two leads of the movie, you have Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot. So Rachel Zegler is an actress who's obviously very controversial, and a lot of people have not liked her. She definitely has her fans, but has more, people who criticize her, of course, than our fans.
Only fans.
You'll end up on. That's right. I remember I like that meme where it shows like Amber Heard, like, my career is over, but then it shows the prison warden from The Mummy grabbing, Evie's thigh. I am a lonely man. It shows the CEO of OnlyFans. I mean, it was good enough for Elon Musk, but... All right, but the thing is, Rachel Zegler, she can act. I mean, there are times where she's kind of overdoing it because she's a theater kid, and the thing is, I can understand in a theater you have to like overdo it on your face so people from the far back can see you, but with a camera, you don't have to do that. You can perfectly see what your, with your facial expressions with that, and she definitely can sing. She has a very lovely singing voice. I would say that her singing is one of the few good things I liked about this movie, or maybe the only thing I liked about this movie. And then you have Gal Gadot, who is a very likable actress who really knows how to do the whole PR thing and really knows how to keep it cool in that. Well, for the most part, minus that cringe Imagine video she did with a bunch of the celebrities, but
Imagine I Can Act.
Good one.
I'm sorry, honey, I love you.
But the thing is, she can't act. And she can't sing that well either. I mean, it's not as atrocious as Emma Watson in Beauty and the Beast, with the auto-tune is like T-Pain on steroids.
But she won't discover that it's him till chapter 3.
But Gail isn't that good of a singer in this movie. And then there's other people in this movie too, like the guy who plays the love interest named Jonathan Prince, or John Prince, I forget his full name.
Jonathan Mid. Yeah.
And then the guy who plays Snow White's father, I mean, when they were singing, I could hear the auto-tune. It was so distracting with that in that regard. Like, Rachel's the only one who can sing, and it's sad when you have, like, someone who can sing, who's not that likable in terms of, IRL, who can sing, and everyone else who's probably okay as people, in real life, but they're not that good at singing. They should have been dubbed in retrospect. So you have this predicament where you got, these two opposites in ways, where it goes to show, like...
Yeah, they were going to have Susan Boyle as Snow White for this.
No, that'd be the Hunchback of Notre Dame. But...
Oh, no.
All right, so... aside from bad casting decisions and not understanding the source material in terms of its story, is that you look at the money spent in this movie and the effects. So the effects in this movie a lot of times look like AI. They don't look real.
At best.
At times, yeah. And there's moments where we have this forest, right, where Snow White runs into, and it's obviously CGI, and it's supposed to be a magical forest, right? But then we see other scenes in the forest, you can tell it's a real forest, doesn't match the rest of the forest scenes, and it's not like the magical forest is that important of a character in this movie, because you look at a movie like Snow White and the Huntsman, the forest being enchanted or magical, whatever you want to call it, definitely played a more important part in that story. And it's something they definitely understood. Kind of like when you make a Batman movie, Gotham City has to be a character in its own way. And then also during that moment, too, where we see the bandits in that movie, and they're like hiding from the Queen's guards or her soldiers or whatever you want to call them. And I looked at that scene, and I looked at you, Steven, and I'm like, watching the scene, would you ever guess this movie cost over $200 million to make?
Not a chance. Like, you can tell it wasn't cheap just from the production value of things like, I don't know, the costumes or the lighting, but in terms of, the camera takes and how they structured the shots, the set designs and things like that, it was just like, what are we doing here? This could be done better with AI, or like a very competently put together fan project with, I don't know, 50 million or something, like that would have been probably done better.
Yeah, and also, of course, we can't forget about the CGI atrocities known as the Seven Dwarfs in this movie. So I imagine they would have had Seven Dwarfs, at least real little people as Seven Dwarfs. But for some reason, out of nowhere on a podcast, Peter Dinklage felt that it was in his self-righteous attitude, be like, oh yeah, the dwarves, that movie was backwards because the dwarves were living in a cave. And I'm like, no, they work in a cave and they live in the cottage. I don't know if you've ever seen the animated movie you're trying to take down. And for some reason, Disney decided to listen to them. They did not cast little people in that movie. I think they had one token little actor in that movie.
Yeah, and he wasn't even one of the dwarves. He was a bandit.
Yeah. Yeah, when the set photo leaked of what they were going to look like, people said that they called it Snow Beige and the 7 Portland Hipsters. Snow Woke and the 7 Mostly Peaceful Protesters.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I mean,
some of this stuff writes itself, you know.
Yeah, and looking at the bandits, I'm like, they don't look like they belong in this movie. They look like they just wandered on set from another production nearby.
To be fair, they probably could have just walked off of a Thor, miniseries or something. I don't know. Like, they looked like they could have belonged there.
Or that, Robin Hood TV show that failed pretty hard.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and then they had the 7 dwarfs in, and you think they would actually cast 7 dwarf actors in this movie? With, actually more like, little people. Or they would have actually, if they made them all CG, they should have just copy and pasted what they looked like from the animated movie. But the thing is, they try to make them look realistic, which is part of the reason why that Cats movie from 2019 didn't work out.
Yeah.
Was that you should have either made this an animated movie, embraced the Broadway side of that show, or just make him look not so realistic and try to play with it and just be fantasy, and not try to make it too realistic because it just does not work.
And we got the worst of both worlds, folks. Aren't we lucky? We got nightmare fuel.
Yeah, there's no way a movie like Snow White should have cost roughly the amount or more than a movie like John Carter, which is another box office failure that Disney made, which I like that movie a good amount. It's way better than this movie. Go check it out if you haven't seen it yet. So the budget of this thing was originally about $209 million, and then when they went back to reshoot this movie a few times, the budget went up between $240 and $270-ish million, and some sources would say maybe $300 million. And this movie does not look like it cost that much to make. And it really does go to show how it seems like a lot of movies nowadays, they just don't know how to budget things, and they're just bad with money. Because I remember a year ago, I was watching this Q&A with Steven Sommers and a 25th anniversary retrospect of The Mummy. And he talked about how when he made his Mummy movies and Van Helsing, that they would shoot extra stuff, but they didn't do any like pickups or reshoots. The only reshoot they ever did was on Van Helsing, and that was one moment when Dracula was by himself on this catwalk in the climax of the movie, and the lighting was off. So they get the actor back to just shoot that one moment. But for the most part, they knew how to balance things back then. They were a lot better with money. And back in the day when a movie opened at like $40 or $50 million, when it was like a blockbuster movie, that was good. But nowadays, that seems not very good because they overspent on these productions. And then you see other kind of studios outside of Disney do this too. So I feel like they should just have a solid script first before they shoot anything. And I know that in the industry, especially with a big movie like that, there are going to be some minor tweaks here and there, but doing like reshooting like big chunks of the movie, or in like that new Captain America movie where they completely reshot the whole movie allegedly, is just not good. They can't get away with this. I mean, kind of back in the 2010s they could, when the industry was doing much better financially, but in the 2020s they can't do that anymore.
You gotta do better, Senator. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, first of all, at this point, with how cheap relatively media is to make, the price tag that we are allowing for things that are increasingly just not delivering remotely the expected box office revenue. I'm personally convinced, and this is a little depressing, but the days of the theatrical experience as we know it may be over, if not going to change drastically for the worse. Just because inflation, people not going out as much, and streaming services. But then also there's the decline in quality, which can't be ignored either. And none of those elements are being helped at all by the industry, because everything's got to be for the most gain economically for their end at your expense. And it's not even for the sake of a good story very much anymore. It's increasingly just for that larger trend of predictable, safe, passive income for them. And I digress. I don't want to sound like a cheap record about that over and over again, but it is going to be a recurring problem, and this is a film that exemplifies that sort of formula, but with Disney to a T. That is why it is largely the crown turd.
So this movie, of course, one of the many reasons why I think it's a movie that represents everything wrong with movies nowadays is that it doesn't stand the original movie that it's a remake of. So looking at how they did movies better back in the day, so animation versus live action is what I like to call this segment. And the thing is, if you look at this movie, aside from changing stuff in that, one of the worst things about this movie is the pacing. I had a whiplash feeling because there's some moments that go by way too fast, or they like overly skim over iconic moments from the animated movie, or when they're not doing that, it comes to a grinding halt and becomes very slow. And I don't think anyone else has brought this up about the movie. It's just that is one of the worst things about this movie, hands down, aside from everything else we've been talking about, we're going to talk about. But when it comes to the various scenes from the animated movie that did it better, in just both like how the writing was and also the camera angles were much better. For example, when the evil queen orders the huntsman to kill Snow White, in the animated movie she's on her throne, and then she stands up and commands him and dramatically picks up the box that she wants the huntsman to put Snow White's heart in. In the live action version, it's like just a casual talk and that, and Gal Gadot's like, "Are you?" And the huntsman actor took all his energy to not burst out laughing during that moment. And then when the huntsman tries to kill Snow White, in the animated version, they really hype up the tension, where Snow White is blissfully unaware she's helping this baby bird find its family. And then the huntsman is like, sneaking up on her with the knife, ready to do the kill. And then he's about to do it, and we see these close-ups of them, and we see him with a knife, and he drops the knife because his hand's trembling, and he can't go through with it. It's a lot more dramatic. In this one, it's just like these medium shots where, reverse angle, like knife being held to Snow White, and then cut to the huntsman and that. It's just so lazy. And then even with the poison apple scene, so it logically makes no sense in the live action version for the evil queen to drink the potion and turn into the old hag while going down the steps. When that happened, I was like, arthritis is probably going to kick in. She's going to tumble down those stairs like, ah!
Yeah,
and it logically made sense for her to become the peddler woman in the same area where she's making the poison apple. And even when they do the poison apple scene in the live action version, it is overly skimmed over. There's really no build-up with it for the mood and also for this dungeon set, which we barely see in this movie. So, and then even in between those scenes, when she's like, the huntsman didn't really do his job. And in the animated movie, it's like, okay, the huntsman was like, okay, I could trick her maybe with showing the heart of a pig, because how would she know what a human heart looks like? But in the live action version, it's an apple. Was this huntsman from like the short bus or something? Because that guy should have been way out of the kingdom by now.
Absolutely.
That is definitely he's definitely a special kind of stupid.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do remember taking note and thinking, like, I think objectively the worst, I don't know what you would call it, the worst adaptation from the animated to this version was the old crone version of the evil queen. It looks like a terrible skin suit costume with a little bit of CG going on. It's much more like Dianne Feinstein hands non-genetically modified fruit to young Zoomer in the woods. Just like it was not good. The performance didn't help at all, and the effects looked like stale dog water. Just
yeah, I think what didn't help was that the key thing that was missing in that design was the big hook nose in the animated movie. But I guess because they had a Jewish actress player, they didn't want to be accused of being anti-Semitic, or I don't know. There was so many problems with everything in this movie. And
that didn't help, but also I think the eyes were also not big enough and piercing in sort of a like haunting way.
Yeah, because when people get old, their eyes kind of sink in that. So it would make sense if they did that, exaggerated the eyes, and maybe did something with their nose.
Right.
That would have helped. And I don't know if they really did anything with their teeth either.
I don't think her voice was even that different either. It was just, "Hey girl, get this fruit."
Trivia fact, the original voice actress for the Evil Queen, do you know how she pulled her Pell Woman voice?
I do not.
She just took her dentures out.
Well, that is something.
But also, when it comes to things they added into this movie that were questionable, so a minor one would be dopey talks. And this one is just, I don't know. It's as bizarre and questionable as having Tom and Jerry talk in the animated Tom and Jerry movie from the 1990s.
Yeah. No, it was not great. Boo, you stink!
But I think the more questionable one was, did the Evil Queen really need a song number?
No, that was so bad. That like, if anything, it just took away from her I'm evil and not like the rest of this girly, fruity, happy child stuff, like, I'm not saying that should have been the goal, but like, it's clear that was more the mood that this version of Snow White was setting out, and instead it was more of a yes queen sort of just terrible song number that was just a excuse for some person to do another sequence on their resume,
Yeah, the only thing I liked about that scene was that she did have the costume that was mostly accurate to the animated movie during that one moment in it. And I also noticed that her cape when she's going down those steps was basically the background to the Wonder Woman 1984 poster.
That's true. I hadn't thought about that. They have to reuse it somewhere, Tyler,
But yeah, the thing is, like, when it comes to Disney, they do have some of the best villains, and they also have some of the best villain song numbers. For example, like, Hellfire or Be Prepared, or even Gaston, which has been YouTube pooped to death in that. The thing is, not every Disney villain needs a song number. I mean, look at Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty. She has no song number. She's one of Disney's greatest villains. Also, from that same voice actress, he had Lady Tremaine from Cinderella, no song number. And the Evil Queen did not need a song number. She was already a menacing, imposing character without a song number. Like, if you watch the 1999 remake of The Mummy, part of the reason why Imhotep is such a credible threat in that movie as the villain, he's the only one who doesn't do anything funny. He is serious the whole way through. I mean, you kind of jokingly say that Arnold Vosloo's facial expressions are unintentionally funny at times because they've been memed to death. But the thing is, he plays it straight and serious throughout when it comes to the whole cast of that movie. But imagine if he was like being all goofy in that, then again, that shows the Marvelification of movies nowadays. Everyone's got to crack a joke. We can't really make it too serious because we got to undercut any kind of tension or anything that can be serious or anything that's going to be engaging in the audience in a good way.
Can't scare the adults, let alone the kids.
Okay, one last thing I wanted to mention before I give my rating or kind of wrap it up is that when it comes to like how obvious like the reshoots were and what they originally shot, and compare that to another live-action Disney movie that also was a big box office failure and also was a fantasy film, is The Nutcracker in the Four Realms. Like, you look back on that movie, you can tell what they reshot versus what they originally shot just by looking at Mackenzie Foy, because she was about 15 to 16 when they originally shot it, and then she was 17 when they did reshoots to that movie to make more action in that movie. And you can tell she's a little bit more mature looking in the reshoots, but even that movie, when it came to the reshoots, despite doing roughly 30-something days worth of reshoots, with a different director, by the way, it looks more visually consistent. This movie does not have that. And it's from the same director, too, by the way, who came back. Even though with those advantages, it just did not look consistent, and it failed in that regard.
One other thing, just before Tyler concludes, I forgot to mention, but talking about the breakneck pacing thing, I just couldn't get over how quickly the poison apple thing happened and then was over. Like, it didn't even matter.
Yeah.
We weren't allowed to sit with things. Even, I recall there was more of like in the original, a dark color tone to match the, oh, this is sad, what happened. It was bright as downtown New York City when that was happening, and it was over within practically 3 to 5 minutes. It blows my mind that was how they chose to do it. But I digress. I don't want to interrupt. That was just something I had to throw in there.
But thank you for bringing that up, because like in the animated movie, it's like it's a dramatic moment, and there's definitely a great moment at the end of the movie. But this one, they just throw it in there because it's like, man, we feel compelled to have it in there, and then she just conveniently shows up, and then just by being there, she causes everyone to gather around to sing. And this is basically the fantasies of theater kids thinking how revolutions work.
Yes, we're gonna have a what do they call that? A flash mob to overthrow the patriarchy. Just.
Is that what a flash mob is, when a bunch of people decide to show up to a store and start looting the place?
No, I think a flash mob is when. To be fair, maybe there's multiple.
Yeah, that is. I know. The flash mob is when people come up. They can either show up to dance, or just to steal.
That's what I meant, was the one where they just come up and start singing or dancing in public. And
I know. I was just making a joke.
Oh, okay. I see.
We're both right.
Yes.
All right. So, what would you give Snow White 2025?
Well, I've been trying to think about it a little while, because, again, I think we can both agree this was not very good. I think that a lot of the problems with it we have explained, but they weren't what you picture from some of the internet discourse and even the trailers and stuff. I don't think that is so much what was bad about it. There was enough here to make something passable, and it still failed at that and left you feeling like, why did I see this? Which is a different type of bad. It's not even the feel-good bad movie. It's the feel bad that you saw it and wasted 2 hours and hope that your dinner's better. So, well, I was going to say just some passing notes real quick, that I do agree that the best part, surprisingly, was the Snow White actress. She definitely has talent, and despite, outside of the film, her choices to do social activism and things like that, commentary which can be problematic on, marketing the film, those did not help and caused a whole lot of issues, but that's divorced and completely separate from her ability to act and sing, which was, I think, the upside of this whole film. The Wicked Witch, or not the Wicked Witch, excuse me. I was thinking about, I think, is it Enchanted or
Wicked?
Wicked, yeah, Wicked there for a second. But yes, the evil queen, Gal Gadot, I'm sorry, honey, you're not it. I mean, you looked the part fine, but it was the most wooden performance of all time. It was not very good overall, and while it got the point it was trying to get across, so that makes it, I think, passable in terms of this isn't literally a 0 out of 100 or something like that. It got the point of the narrative across. It just wasn't as good as the original, and I'm sorry, I know that you shouldn't compare two separate things, but in a certain sense this was a remake, so there should have been at least some of the general theme preserved, and they chose to do away with that. So, okay, was it better? No. I think it kind of just objectively didn't work as well, and while there is some, I guess potentially positive takeaway, and I can save myself, it's less compelling, though, if the rest of the cast is a bunch of dumpster characters that no one really cares about. So that also marks against it. The song numbers, aside from a handful, weren't as good. The dwarves weren't even that memorable, which is a crime. And the falling action and conclusion, objectively, I still have scarred into my childhood memory, that final conflict against the evil queen, and I think it was on the mine carts, right, or something.
It was chasing up that mountain.
Yeah, chasing up the mountain and then falling down in the storm. I still remember that in my head, even though I haven't seen it in probably 20 something years. And this, I barely remember it now. I watched it within the past probably 48 hours, and I barely remember. Yeah, it was at the castle, and she threw a temper tantrum, and that was basically it. It involved the mirror somehow, but it was gimmicky. It was hollow. And aside from Snow White herself, it was not a very redeemable project. So, while I can't say that I have to, give it a 0 out of 100 or something, If I were to give it a percentage, I would probably say at best it's like maybe a dead on 60, if not like a 58%, just because it meets the bare threshold for, yes, it's a movie. Congratulations, you're not on Tubi, or like, you know, a YouTube thing that was made in someone's backyard. Congratulations. I would hope not at that price tag, but you can't say much more than that. And it really was just the amalgamation of all the problems, which are non-redemptive, but you can still technically say it was a movie. So would not recommend seeing it in theaters. I think it's an interesting social experiment to compare on streaming if you want. Just, you know, between the original and this to see why the original is so much better. But that's my take. I would say probably a 58 to a 60% if I were to give it a grade.
With my thoughts on this live-action remake of Snow White. Now, I think this is objectively the worst live-action Disney remake. And the reason why I say that is that this movie, at least the animated version that this is a remake of, represents the legacy of Walt Disney. Like Walt Disney, when he made that movie back in the day, and just reading at the interviews from people from these books called Snow White's People, Volume 1 and 2, about interviews from people who worked on that movie, highly recommend checking it out. But the thing is, reading the interviews from those people, and while there were people who worked on that movie and fine-tuned it to the movie that it turned out to be, that movie was pure 100% Walt Disney. He was the one who came up with the idea and shepherded the whole thing from start to finish. He was a mastermind behind it all, and that was just his movie when you watch it. Like, even though there are other movies after the fact you could argue are better in terms of the quality of the animation or maybe the song numbers or so on and so forth, when you watch that movie, Walt Disney himself said that that was his masterpiece and that was his favorite, even though a movie like Cinderella was one he could relate to personally because he was trying to work hard towards a dream, and the moment when Cinderella goes from like the rags to go into that ball gown, that animation was like a favorite piece of animation at the company. Snow White is what he would consider his masterpiece, and the fact that Disney did this to their legacy really does go to show that not only do they not understand that movie or their other anime classics, but they do not respect the legacy of Walt Disney. And it's really disheartening to see that in retrospect. And one of the main reasons why the current CEO really needs to go. And with that said and done, I will say faint praise to Rachel Zegler singing. And while I know you know, pains you to say it, that Gal Gadot is not very good in the movie, I know you have the hots for her in that. With me, with Rachel Zegler, it's like, yeah, I admit that she is physically attractive, but I'm like, I don't know, your personality is just like, can't get near you.
You gotta cue up the thumbnail of her chin out with the weird lip in the movie.
Oh, the new face of Derp?
Yeah, like when we're talking about this. Just, yeah. That's a good moment.
I know. Or maybe it could be a redemption arc if she finds me or something.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
But overall, this movie is just bad in all the ways imaginable. It was a perfect storm of being a box office bomb and a scandalous movie. And it is no surprise this movie was going to fail, which I predicted. So, on A to an F scale, I would give the 2025 version of Snow White that was made from Disney an F.
Yeah, that's pretty strong, but I understand it.
Yep, just like your strong feelings for, you know, the evil queen actress.
Yeah, no, that's completely fair.
I know you're, you know, proud with your, you know, affection for Gal and that. But
she's my gal. What can I say?
Yeah. But for me, when it comes to the co-star with Rachel, it's like, I like, you know, part of me was like, you know, let's talk to her, but I'm like, no, don't do it.
Yeah, no, that's pretty much me with her too. Is not the main actress, but Gal is like politically. I'm so like, yeah, I'm sorry, hon. That you can't be saying that at the table. My family's gonna give you weird looks.
This would make a really funny romantic comedy. I would say that would be great. Yeah. If we're like, all right, we're decadent to her, but I don't know, but when they could learn each other from something, yeah, that would be pretty good. We should do that.
Yes.
All right, but I want to end this, well, kind of a couple epilogues, is that I want to give some constructive criticism, because I don't think enough people do that these days. They just want to blindly bash something, or just without offering any constructive criticism, or say like, okay, what I would do differently to fix it. Well, if I had made a live-action remake of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs for Disney, and I had full creative freedom on the movie, I would have gone in either one of two directions. Either I would have made an adaptation of the book Fairest of All, A Tale of the Wicked Queen. The thing is, that book is about the perspective of the evil queen. It gives her backstory, explains why she's obsessed with her beauty, how she got the magic mirror, and also why she knows how to do potions, which was something with her having like magical powers in this movie. It made no sense. It was kind of awkward that they even gave her that without any explanation. I would either gone that route, or I just would have made a faithful adaptation of the animated movie. But I would have incorporated deleted scenes from the animated movie into this one to be fresh. For example, I would have included the argument with the Seven Dwarfs where Grumpy gets into a fist fight with Doc in a deleted scene with a bedroom argument, or maybe an extended moment of the evil queen as her peddler woman disguise making the poison apple, or Snow White dreaming and she dreams about dancing with the prince in the clouds, which was a deleted scene but they ended up cutting from the movie, and various other things too I would have included in that movie to make it as fresh as possible. When it came to casting, I would have cast probably Eva Green as the Evil Queen. I think she would have been perfect. I mean, I've been open to like Olivia Wilde as the Evil Queen as well. And with Snow White, I would have cast either Mackenzie Foy, Indy Isley, Haley Steinfeld, or maybe even Odeya Rush as Snow White. But most of all, I definitely would have most certainly cast real little people as these Seven Dwarfs.
Because you're woke. No. No, I agree with, pretty much all of that. And he forgot to add the part that he would have taken out the male lover for a gay lover, if I recall. He said, please make it Snow White and Snow-ite, just... No, I agree. There's not much more to say. I just had to crack some jokes.
Yeah, I mean, well, I guess you're like an MCU movie.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, speaking of a joke in that, I don't know if you knew this, but do you know what Olivia Wilde's real last name is?
No idea.
Cockburn.
Could you spell that?
Let me look it up.
Did you say Cockburn or Coppern?
Cockburn.
Cockburn?
Yeah.
Okay, that explains a lot of why she would... That is wild. She was just like, you know what, my last name's Wild, because that's a wild thing to have as a last name.
Yeah, it's Olivia Jane Cockburn.
It's literally spelled like your genitals and burning. That's crazy.
I can't blame her for changing her last name. I'm not going to give her any flack for that.
My name's Stephen the Clap. Yeah, no, that's pretty bad. That's pretty bad.
Yeah, even there have been actresses at Disney parks that I've met that look a lot more accurate to the Snow White from the animated movie, not just in how they physically look, but also how they dressed in that from the animated movie compared to this live-action version.
Also, while we're completely off the rails here, let me do a cancelable offense. For the romantic, idea for Tyler and I to write of either him with Rachel or me with Gal. For me with Gal, it can be the title can be From IUD to IDF.
I thought you were going to go with I Do You.
Oh, well, that could work too, yeah.
Wait.
I do to IDF, you mean?
I do. Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, there we go.
But to kind of get back on track, I want to take the moment to debunk this really bad rumor about the anime classic. So, Snow White and Seven Dwarfs is not only my favorite Disney movie, it's also my favorite animated movie, and I put it in my top 10 favorite movies of all time. There was this really bad rumor that started about 5 years ago or so about the age gap between Snow White and the Prince. Now, it is true that Snow White is 14 in the animated movie because Walt Disney didn't want to make her too old because he thought, well, I would have a hard time marketing the movie to her as girls. And a way people would argue that the story of Snow White is about a girl becoming a woman because that's roughly the age when girls start to go through puberty and they have, bodily changes. And the Seven Dwarf characters are kind of like the dramatic personality types of men. So when she can handle that, she's ready to, of course, find true love with the prince. However, do you know what people were suggesting the prince's age in Snow White was?
I have no earthly idea.
31.
Ooh! Not beating the allegations. Ooh!
However, it's been debunked, at least I've been trying to debunk it with other people, but evidence is that the actual age of the Prince of Snow White is 18. at least in the production notes with the people who worked on this movie. And they actually did have teenage boys come in to do live action references of the prince, and had a hard time animating the prince, which is why he's not in the movie that much. And early animation footage, he looked like he floated from what I've heard. So when you see the prince in the movie nowadays as it exists, that was actually redos of the animation to kind of fix the prince in that movie, which explains later on you don't see too much prince characters in Disney animated movies during the time of Walt Disney, because they, I guess, had a hard time animating a convincing looking prince in those movies. I mean, with the princess, they obviously had to get that right, but the prince had a hard time doing that, and they figured, well, he doesn't really have to be in the movie that much, which is why the prince in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs doesn't have much screen time. But bottom line, there's only a 4-year age gap between the two of them, not a ridiculous age gap.
He was 87. Yeah. No, I hear you on that. That would...
I mean, if you look at a problematic one age gap, you look at Pocahontas and John Smith in Pocahontas.
Yeah. Let alone the other contexts of it, just like...
Or Esmeralda and who's that guy from the Hunchback of Notre Dame? Not Judge Claude Frollo, the other guy, the captain character.
Yeah, I'm forgetting, but he might as well be John Smith for like how he looked.
Yeah, another blonde guy going for a woman way too young.
Blonde guy in armor, yeah, just swashbuckler.
All right, so this is Tyler from Anchor Reviews.
And Steven, aka The Big Steve, on YouTube and Instagram, and I forgot to mention on TikTok.
All right, and we hope you enjoyed this video, and we hope to make a lot more in the future. Please like and subscribe.
Hi-ho, watch this damn video.
Remember we're watching, or at least we're playing Call of Duty Black Ops, and there's a moment when the Volkuda level, and this big guy kills this one guard with this pickaxe, and during that moment I sang, hi-ho, it's off to hell you go.
That's good.
Yeah, all right. We could easily been better writers on this than Greta Gerwig.
Oh, absolutely. No question. Where's our Academy Award?
Yeah, really.